Good evening and a very warm welcome to you wherever you may be. You're watching the Football Out West show, and it is going to be a massive show tonight. A massive show indeed. And welcome to the screen, my co-host Craig Filer. Craig, episode 24 of the Football Out West show. Can you believe it?
Evening, everybody. Evening, Tonch. No, I can't. I keep saying that what started out as a bit of fun for us has quickly grown into something that we never thought would, for certain. But yeah, it's great fun every Thursday tuning in, and we hope that as we say every week, that we hope we have another great show for you tonight.
Absolutely. We have got a jam-packed show tonight. We've got a lot of great guests, some nice surprises. I'll just leave it at that. But indeed, we've got some and lots of news. It's getting closer. We are getting closer to the end of the rainbow, the end of the tunnel. The light is surely there. And, mate, we've got some, look, I guess we've got some news, but we haven't got any news. And what is coming up in the show tonight? Let's first of all talk about some of those things.
All right, so we'll kick off with some news, I suppose, around the restrictions, or
everyone wants to know what is going on there, don't they?
Yeah, I think everybody does. Look, we had Peter Filopoulos on the show last week, and as we said towards the end of the show, Peter didn't give a lot away. Spoken like a true politician, and he was on the World Game this week with Lucy Zelic, and he gave a little bit more away, but still wasn't pretty reluctant to give too much. But look, we understand tonight that there's a meeting of clubs within Victoria, of which there's a document or presentation that they will be providing clubs in terms of what post-COVID-19 looks like, and hopefully the start of some kind of football over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, now that will be interesting. It is going to be. Look, we've got a little bit of a sneak preview of what it looks like, and we'll just show the front page because and that's what it is: Community Competitions Club Consultation Session. And that is going to be happening later tonight. So, look, no doubt, everything we talked about last week on the show, the scenarios, the consultation, it seems to me that it is happening. Last week's guest, Peter Filopoulos, attracted a lot of viewers, a lot of live viewers. I think we've never had that many live viewers tuning in when the show was on. I guess, Craig, a lot of people were asking for questions that at the time he simply could not provide. And I get the frustration of a lot of people. They're wanting to know, start dates or what are the scenarios. But I guess the whole purpose of the federation is to look after its members, and its members are its clubs. And I guess that's what supposedly is happening tonight, that those various scenarios are going to be played out with the clubs themselves. And then I guess we'll find out all the information thereafter. But Peter was on the World Game. Was it yesterday or the day before? Yesterday, in fact.
Yeah.
I caught bits and pieces of it. Did you catch much of it?
I was driving in and out, so I was trying to catch it as I was going along. But I think, I've had a few messages today, but I think the message was very similar to what it was last week. He doesn't know. He's not going to commit to too much. It was more around, I think, about the future of the game that Peter was talking about yesterday, that, around, getting more people playing, reducing the costs. He broke down, he did go into the cost of, NPL and why it's so high, and broke it down. When you sit back and you think about what he said, it absolutely makes sense that, whilst some people are paying $2,200 for fees, they're actually playing 40 weeks of the year with 3 training sessions in most instances, sometimes 4 plus a game on the weekend. So, they're actually getting good value for money over that period of time, over the 40 weeks. But just going back to tonight's meeting, we're led to believe that the Football Federation are working on a number of scenarios of potential start dates, whether it's June, July or August. Looking at different scenarios again tonight to cover the full season, half a season, division splits. extension to the season into November, possibly into November. Working through relegation and promotion and enforcement and what the implications are for clubs. So there's a bit going on tonight. I think again we'll know a little bit more over the coming days. The fact of the matter is that the government has relaxed, I suppose, the laws on what can happen. We still haven't had, as far as I'm aware, when we can start training. I've heard it'll be next week, Monday, hopefully, and that'll be good. There will be some restrictions around that, and we'll post something up that's to perhaps for you guys to have a look at, where they're saying we can only have 10 players and a coach, but that works. It's about getting kids back on the field. As long as it's in a safe environment, then that's fine. What we don't want to do is go out gun for leather, and all of a sudden there's a massive problem again, and everybody's got to stop. So I think there's a fair bit to think about. Yeah,
look, Craig, you're a coach at NPL level. I'm a coach at Mini Roos level. We're both coaches. We both want to get out there. We're hanging to get out there. I'm sure the kids themselves are hanging to get out there, and the players are as well. But as you said, there's a lot of grey matter at the moment. There's a lot of grey in between. Can you have 9 players and one coach on one half of the field, and 9 players and another coach on the other half of the field? Can you have 2 or 3 teams on the one reserve or whatever like that? No one can answer these questions at the moment. Everyone's posing these questions. And the reality is, at the moment, look, Football Victoria have said, they did release a statement on Monday that, they welcome the advice given by the Victorian government regarding its decision to ease stage 3 COVID-19 restrictions. That was on Monday, and the press release is on the Football Victoria website. A day later, they said, further to yesterday's announcement in relation to the easing of stage 3 restrictions, FV is yet to receive the further detailed guidance in relation to return to training guidelines. I do believe those guidelines did come out by the Victorian government, the Department of Sport or whatever it is, earlier today, but there's still, Football Victoria obviously still wanting to get everything clear as day, so that they can go back to the clubs and they can say, this is what is allowed, this is what is not allowed. Remembering, if they go too soon, there's also always the issues of insurance. Now, will insurance cover it? Will insurance not cover it? At training, chances are not many people are going to get injured, but they do. And if there's one person in 100,000 in Victoria that does get injured, well, then it could stuff up everything for everyone. So I get there has to be a degree of caution. I guess if we waited 8 weeks, we might as well wait another week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, look, I think you're right there, Tanch. I think, let's make sure that it's right. We've also heard on the grapevine that there's a number of NPL clubs. I think out of the 40 clubs, I'm led to believe that 9 have said that they actually don't want to commence the season, which again is interesting, because obviously there's a lot of costs involved and stuff within these clubs. So look, we don't know. Sorry.
I was going to say, what you're referring to is an article by Joey Lynch earlier today on ftbl.com.au, and it basically said, it's quoting, I think it's quoting the Association of Australian Football Clubs chairman, Nick Galatas, who's actually, I'm not sure if he actually said this, or what it's saying is basically, I'll read this. It is understood that up to 9 clubs in the 14-team Victorian top tier believe the men's senior 2020 season should be cancelled, although there remains a commitment to staging junior competitions and an openness to a women's senior competition. Mate, I get this. I totally understand this. And I guess the whole purpose of that is because most of those clubs get their revenue from match day tickets, canteens, and what you're not. Now, if they don't have crowds, they don't have revenue, how are they supposed to pay the referees? How are they meant to do all of that? I get that. I understand that. Look, I guess that's where the governing body of Victoria is. They're working with all these different scenarios. Maybe the NPL might not go ahead. Maybe State League One may not go ahead.
The problem is there with that, Tonch. If the NPL doesn't go ahead, nothing could go ahead, because it's then unfair on your State League 1, State League 2, State League 3.
Promotion, relegation, yeah. So
likes of our sponsor George Cross, and and the other Sydenham and Brimbank and all those teams in State 1 who have aspirations to get into the NPL, then it either starts or it doesn't. It can't be. It's going to start for some and not for others. It's just not right. So let's hope they come to the right decision. It is tough. It's a tough situation, as we've said for the last 5 or 6 weeks, which we've gone on about it. It does come down to finances, unfortunately. And when you haven't got spectators coming in through the gates who are paying money behind the bar or the canteen, it makes life very, very difficult for clubs, and we have to understand that. So
absolutely.
For me, it starts or it doesn't. For the juniors, look, let's get the juniors going. I have no issues with the juniors. Let's get their season running. But let's be absolutely positive that if the season's going to run at senior level, whether it's community football or NPL, number one, it has to go ahead and it has to be a full season. And number two, there has to be relegation and promotion.
Yeah.
If it's not those two things, forget the season start in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very good point you make. And look, the article goes on to quote Peter Philopoulos, saying, we're meeting with our clubs tonight and we're looking forward to hearing their points of view. So obviously there's going to be that. He also says, we're pleased also with the government announcement around the Experience Economy Survival Package. This is interesting. And there's a $40 million fund for community sport and recreational bodies, which includes Football Victoria and our leagues and clubs. Now, split between all the different sports, all the different organisations, all the different bodies in Victoria, $40 million is not a lot of money. Not a lot of money. However, obviously, I guess it would be so much easier if they said, well, $5 million is to go to football clubs in Victoria. How do we divvy that up? How do we manage to do it? I mean, we've all got our ideas, I suppose. And look, if we can't watch the games, one thing I think we probably should look at doing is maybe somehow introducing some form of grassroots subscription level where at least at NPL, NPL2, NPL3, fans can pay $5 or $10 per game and get their game telecast or something like that. But you know what? That will be something interesting that we can talk to with some of our guests tonight. We've got 2 Perla guests. And who are they, Craig?
Well, first and foremost, we've got a great guest in, and he's I suppose our voice of football on Fox Sports. Mr. Simon Hill will be joining us, and that's going to be a great insight into in Simon's career from the early days to current, and obviously touch on, I hope, a little bit about what's happening with Foxtel. Oh, sorry, with Fox Sports within the A-League. And secondly, we have a player who I suppose needs no introduction, ex-Socceroo, ex-Man City, Leicester, Wolves, Brisbane Roar, and the mighty Point Cup Jets.
Melbourne Knights, can't forget that either.
And Danny will be joining us just after the break for a look at his career and talk about again what's going on in the world of football within Australia.
Now, Danny's a real blast from the past in more ways than one. He was our guest on our inaugural episode, way back in episode 1. He was the first one, and we had when we were interviewing him, he was sitting in his car in a car park on the Gold Coast, and it was absolutely thunderstorming. So hopefully the weather conditions up on the Gold Coast are a little bit better than it was that time. But no, two very, very interesting persons that will be appearing on our show later tonight. But ladies and gentlemen, folks, send in your questions, comments, suggestions in the comments section. Be an active part of our show. We've already got quite a fair few people getting on board, putting their answers. Peter Couch is very, very active already. We've got Kevin Thuma as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want you guys to be a real active part of tonight's show, and do not go away at all, because both our guests tonight are going to provide a real insight into the state of football in Australian football at the moment, Craig.
Absolutely, Conch. Absolutely. Looking forward to listening to both of them, especially Simon. I've got a bit of an interest into Simon's history and where he come from. So really looking forward to that.
Could that have anything to do with the old homeland, where apparently Simon once upon a time?
Wait and see what Simon has to say. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Look, don't go away. We're going to be back very, very shortly. But now, in the meantime, we're talking about inspirational characters, inspirational people. Around the world. In some cases closer to home during this COVID era. Now, the following gentleman, I guess he hasn't really got a direct connection with football out west, but yes, he has. And this following person, Craig's got no idea about this. This is why I've taken him off the screen. The following gentleman, can you believe, is 100 years of age. 100 years of age. And he was interviewed on ITV Wales earlier today, and the video has gone absolutely viral. And we're going to show it now very, very shortly. And this is the man they call Owen Filer.
All my life, I'm 100 years old. And I can, yes, I am. I'm 100 years old. I can remember the trams running down there, where those bricks are.
Are you actually 100 years old?
Yes, I went across the road.
You're 100 years old?
Yes.
Do you believe this man's 100 years old?
Yeah, I know you don't. I know. You never will. You never will.
Ask my
mother. She was there at the time.
You were born in 1919.
Yeah.
Given that you've lived through world wars, all other crises we've had, is this one scary?
Yes, very scary. Yeah, this is worse than war, isn't it?
Is it?
It's unseen.
When you were born, Lloyd George was Prime Minister.
Yes.
What do you make of our current leaders in this crisis?
Rubbish. We want somebody like a Churchill, you know, somebody solid. Somebody really solid to get out of the reins and steer us the right way, because we're certainly not going the right way, are we?
What are you missing about life at the moment?
The lockdown, where it's pinning everybody to their house, isn't it? They can't go out, they can't do what they should be doing.
What are you doing for your exercise then?
Go for a walk anywhere. I can walk the riverbank and it's dead flat. Or I can go on my scooter. I've got an electric scooter. But it's like having a car. You just jump on and it's better to walk. It's natural, isn't it? Legs are for walking, aren't they?
They reckon we're going to have the biggest financial drop for hundreds of years. Now, you lived through the Great Depression. You may not see those scenes again, but you remember that. Give us a flavour of what that was like.
We had nothing. We had nothing at all. My sister and me went to bed hungry, asking for a sandwich. And my mother said, there's bread in the pantry. If you have it now, you won't have it for your breakfast in the morning. And that's the end of that. So go to bed and try and sleep.
Do you think this crisis will remind us all of a sense of community?
Oh yes, they won't forget this now. I've had people say to me, do you want anything, Mr. Filer? Are you short of anything? I'll do your shopping for you. Well, see, I've never heard that before. Well, I didn't have to, did I? Because there was no such illnesses as this now. But at least they are there, aren't they? They've suddenly remembered. We've all got to help one another, haven't we? I've had several offers, but none of marriage.
There you go, hey. That man was your 100-year-old grandfather, Owen Filer. Mate, the guy's an absolute legend.
You've just started me off again. I must have watched that 30 times today, Tonch. We've had so many messages of support from people. And I mean this when I say this, guys, all around the world. I woke this morning at 10 to 7 to have a text from Gold FM here in Melbourne wanting to speak to me about him. So he's been on Twitter, and this morning he's been on GMTV, which is Good Morning Great Britain, with can't think of his name now. But look, he's incredible. His mannerisms, just everything about him is superb. And I was lucky enough to be there for his 100th last year, and looking at him at the moment, I'm looking forward to seeing. He wants to get to 105. That's That's his goal, because one of his relatives was 105 and he wants to beat her. So incredible character.
Well, I tell you what, we did put him there just because he is absolutely inspirational. Fair income, dead set, he's inspirational. But tonight we've got a very strong Welsh themed show, because our next guest, he spent quite a fair bit of time in Wales, and we'll find out all about that. But Craig, let's sit back and just take in this little bit of a show reel of our next guest, Simon Hill. Absolutely fantastic. Goes, I think, for about 3 minutes or so. And just sit back and enjoy this introduction to our very next guest.
Well, football is not just what I do, it's who I am.
Del Piero! That's what they came to see. That's why Sydney FC paid the money. That is the measure of the man.
And I fell in love with it right from the off, and I've stayed faithful ever since.
Cristiano's in. Could he nick the points for Australia? He can! Would you believe it?
How can you not be totally involved with a game that is global, with so many different tournaments, with so many different emotions?
Rodolfo will go for goal. Oh, what a strike! What a way to score the opening goal of the Asian Cup!
I've got the best job in the world.
Good evening and welcome to part 2 of our year in review.
And Mark Bresciano has won the game for Australia, and you have to say they do not deserve it.
3-0 for Norwich City. Smashing performance by them.
Here's Aloisi for a place in the World Cup. He scored! Australia have done it!
All from the master. Let's hear from the Stoke master. Gudjon Torderson is talking to Peter Stevens.
Long throw, goalkeeper's come, hasn't got there. Harry Kewell, and then poked home by Tim Cahill. Towards Kennedy. Might drop for Kewell. Harry Kewell has done it. Australia's golden boy has come up with a golden goal. Aloisi. Cahill. Cahill! Tim Cahill has done it again. What a goal by Tim Cahill. 2-1 Australia. Oh, it's a wonderful moment in Gardner's Land. He's in an offside position. Aloisi might go on his own. Aloisi! 3-1! It's all over! 3 points for Australia!
Then when you look back on this,
It was actually one of the best days of my life, and how hard it was to get there.
Well, it's great to have these big names, coming to Australia. Obviously, we had Manchester United and Liverpool.
Spotovic still going. It's Ratko and it's Spotovic! 2-0 Sydney FC! Splendid finish by the Serbian!
And indeed it was. 4 straight wins for the first time in A-League history for Sydney FC.
What a hit! And would you credit it? It's Timmy Cahill. If this goes in, it's Sydney's crown. Ninkovic scores! Dreams have come true in sky blue! Ball for Robbie Cruz, hangs it up, Cahill, there it is! A half-century of international goals for Timmy Cahill. Still Kariatonic! Has he won it for Melbourne victory? The villain turned hero in navy blue. Still alive for Mark Bridge. And Vinicic! 5-4! What a madness! Bottom in November, premiers in April, champions in May.
Welcome back to the Football Out West show. That was utter madness, wasn't it? That was fantastic, and that was a great little introduction to our next guest. Craig, you do the honours.
Yeah, we're really pleased to have this gentleman on the show. I know he's really busy at the moment, but he's taken his time out. He obviously hasn't bothered to shave, but we do welcome Mr. Simon Hill to the show. Welcome, Simon. How are we?
Good to be with you guys. Yaki Da, Craig. Great to hear that Welsh accent.
So Simon was got, that was a fantastic little show reel, and it was great to see there was a cameo there at the Stoke City ground by your son. He looks very much like you, doesn't he?
Yeah,
How long ago was that?
That was a long time ago, pre-beard and pre-grey hair. So that was during my days at ITV back in 2001. So, yeah, nearly 20 years ago. Wow,
Yeah.
that was quick.
Speaking of ITV, what did you think of that little clip of that 100-year-old trooper, Mr. Filer himself, hey? That was amazing. 100 years old.
Absolutely fantastic. And as Craig knows, because we had talked about this before, I spent the early part of my career living in Cardiff. So I'm well used to that accent.
We'll go into that in a moment, Simon, so don't spoil my thunder.
Lovely accent. Lovely to see him looking well.
Yeah. There's one thing I can guarantee: there's no chance of me getting to 100. All right, so we can safely say that.
Me either, Craig. Don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, Simon. Really looking forward to having a chat with you tonight and going through a little bit about your career. You know, how it all started for you and up to the present day. So yeah, just again answer as honestly as you want to be. So I really want to start off by looking back at your early days back in the UK, if that's okay.
Of course.
Obviously, you've had a very distinguished career to date, but I want to touch on something, and it's like as if it's the Welsh show here tonight. You graduated from Portsmouth University, I think it was, in about 1990.
Yeah, it was actually Portsmouth Polytechnic in those days, but they've all since graduated to become universities. So, but yeah, Polytechnic, university, whatever.
Yeah, and you took a role up as a newspaper freelance writer for the local newspapers. And then, sorry.
Yeah, I actually did that when I was studying my postgrad course, which was a pre-entry course in newspaper journalism. So I actually wanted to be a writer, and my career started by doing match reports for the Portsmouth youth team in the old South East Counties combination. I used to get paid £5 per match report. Got a lift with the team on the team bus, and used to get a fish and chip lunch on the way home. So that was my start in journalism.
Perfect. And I understand that, you know, commentary, and we'll touch on that a little bit in a minute, but commentary wasn't something you were thinking of doing. Am I right?
Correct. I mean, broadcasting wasn't really something I was thinking of doing. As I said, I wanted to write, really. My ambition was to be on The Guardian or the Daily Mirror, being a bit of a lefty, you know. So the broadcasting thing sort of happened by accident, and it was thanks to the radio station in your home country in South Wales. When I graduated in 1991 in the UK, there was a big recession, one of many, and there weren't really that many jobs in journalism, certainly not in written journalism. So I applied for so many and got knocked back on so many occasions. In desperation, really, I applied for a job as a commercial production writer, basically writing adverts for a radio station in South Wales called Red Dragon FM. And they wrote back to me and said, look, we don't really think you're very suitable for that job, but we see that you're very interested in sport and you've got some brief experience writing those match reports in the Portsmouth News. We've got a job that's just come up as a sports reporter. Would you be interested in that? So, of course, you know, that's what I wanted to do. So I went for the interview and was lucky enough to get it. So at a very early stage, my career took a rather different path to what I was expecting it to. I really wanted to write, and in many ways I still do, to be honest. But yeah, I went into broadcasting instead, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, fantastic. And tell us a little bit about your time in God's country, because
I had 18 wonderful months in South Wales, living in Cardiff in a district called Roath Park. Used to frequent many of the bars.
Alsatians walk around in twos, don't they?
That's right. Yeah, many a happy night down St David's Street and having a pint of brains and going to Kiwi's bar and all those, you know, Friday and Saturday night, all the boys used to come down from the valleys for, you know, either to try and pull a girl or to have a fight, either or. They didn't mind, preferably both. And of course, I covered Cardiff City a fair bit as well, thanks to the late Phil Suarez, who was the Cardiff City reporter back in the day. I know you remember him, Craig. He actually persuaded Cardiff to pay for me to go on my very first European trip, which was the Cup Winners' Cup in '93, Admira Wacker of Austria against Cardiff City. So it was wonderful ground.
You have to say that really slowly so people don't get the wrong impression. Where did you go?
Admira Vaca.
That's better. Yeah, perfect.
Now, Simon, an Englishman in Wales, was it a hostile kind of a reception, or was it a fairly, jovial, friendly type of a welcoming? Well, how did you find it in Wales initially, and then once you got your foot, I suppose, on the ground, so to speak?
Well, it was a bit like being an Englishman in Australia, really. There was a bit of hostility, but look, by and large, apart from when the big rugby games were on, which was once a year, and obviously then it became a little bit more intense. But given that I wasn't much of a fan of rugby anyway, it didn't really bother me. So I fitted in quite nicely in Wales. There were a good bunch of people. The only issue I had really with South Wales, Cardiff City aside, and we didn't really cover Swansea. We didn't go that far west. So apart from Cardiff City and Newport County, who were in the league in those days, they dropped out and have since come back. There wasn't a lot of football to get your teeth into. It was, of course, more predominantly a rugby union area. So that's why I left after 18 months. I was desperate really to get back to covering football on a more full-time basis, which is what I did.
Very good. Tonch?
Oh, I was just going to say, after a few years, your career progressed once more in a few roles within the BBC, including the sports show Radio 5 Live, where you worked as a commentator in the Premiership and European football. So it was time to move on, I guess. And look, as you mentioned, in Wales, it's predominantly a rugby country. England, obviously, football through and through. How did you find it, and what was your standout game you commentated on in that phase of your career?
Look, there was a lot of big games that I commentated on. I think for any British kid growing up, the FA Cup final is very, very special. Maybe a little bit less so these days, but certainly when I was growing up, the FA Cup final was the big event of the year. And I know it was pretty much the same here in Australia. So I called the 1996 FA Cup final for the BBC World Service. So I went out globally, Manchester United against Liverpool, not my two favourite teams, but a heck of an occasion to cover at the old Wembley Stadium. That was very special for a kid from northwest England. There were other games, the European Championship final of the same year between Germany and the Czech Republic. I also had a wonderful experience going over to Burkina Faso in West Africa to cover the African Cup of Nations in 1998, which was, let me tell you, if you've never been to a Cup of Nations, and most people won't have, it's a life experience. That was terrific. And I had, there were other big games. In 2000, I basically was the West Ham United commentator during their European run. So I went to France to cover their game against Metz. I went to Croatia to do their tie against Osijek. Went to Romania where they played Steaua Bucharest. Interesting story about that one. In the press room pre-game, there was an awful kerfuffle, and we thought that somebody was unwell or some huge footballer, maybe Georgi Hadji, had walked through the door. We didn't know. And when we stood up to have a look, there was Larry Hagman, J.R. Ewing from Dallas, those who remember that show back in the day, with his big Stetson hat. And it was the most surreal sort of moment. And my co-commentator, a guy called John Murray, who's still working, he's the BBC football correspondent today, looked at me and said in his Geordie accent, "I don't believe it. Is that who I think it is?" I said, "Yeah, I think it is." So I went over to try and get an autograph, and because this was the days before mobile phones. And he said, I've been told not to because it'll cause kind of a rush. So apparently he was there because he was big friends with the king, with the Kaiser Wilhelm of Romania, and reruns of Dallas were massive in Romania. So yeah, lots of very different eclectic experiences, but I wouldn't have missed any of it.
No,
now, you obviously talked about the FA Cup, how massive it is, and even here it's obviously a big thing. And I guess you've been a part of the FFA Cup since its inception through Fox Sports, obviously. Can it ever, in your opinion, well, maybe not get as big as the FA Cup in England, but can it become massive here in Australia, the concept of an FFA Cup?
Well, Tonchi, I think it already is. I have to say, I think the FFA Cup is probably my favourite time of the year.
Oh, I agree.
Because
Absolutely.
it's a chance to visit grounds that we don't, as commentators or broadcasters, we don't visit very often. It's a chance to connect with a part of the football community that we're not able to on a regular basis through covering the A-League. And you get to go to some brilliant places with great food. You know, the Chavapi at Bentley Greens, I still remember, and same at Heidelberg United the souvlaki at Heidelberg United was fantastic. So you get to connect with an audience and a part of the football community that, you know, we don't normally get to do. So I think it's been the most wonderful addition. The only real thing that I'm annoyed about is that it took so long. And of course, it connects the tiers as well. The next stage is to have a second division promotion, relegation, and a proper pyramid. I want that too. I know it's tricky, but I think maybe it's time we had that. So the FFA Cup for me is very, very special. I think most in the football community think it is. The only change I would make to it, to make it that little bit extra special, I would have the final every year on a standalone weekend in Canberra. That's our capital. The road to Canberra, the same as the road to Wembley. You can have it in November, the same time of year, have it around Remembrance Weekend, and have an Australian-New Zealand international, you know, to commemorate the fallen in the world wars. You can make a real special football occasion out of that weekend. I'd love to see it. I have suggested it, but at the moment, it's fallen on deaf ears.
That's a great idea.
Great idea, absolutely. Anyone else think that idea? Well, they could even push it out into January and have it part of the summer nats, and, you know, instead of flares and what you're not, they can have burnouts in the middle of the pitch. Okay, now we're getting a bit ridiculous. Craig?
Just to our listeners, if anybody's got any questions to Simon, please pop them on the chat, and we'll do our very best to get Simon to answer your questions. But I just want to go back a little step, and 2003. I think, Simon, was when you came to Australia.
Yep.
There or thereabouts. A decision, I'm sure, you know, having come from the UK yourself, that you haven't looked back. How did that all come about? How did you sort of work for various, you know, the BBC and then other little other programs during that time? How did the opportunity for you to come to Australia come about?
Well, it was a strange thing, really. So I left the BBC in 2001, and I went to work for a brand new operation called the ITV Sport Channel, which was the first real challenge in terms of the pay TV platform to Sky Sports in the UK. And I went there, you know, full of optimism, as we all did, who got employed. I got headhunted by the BBC. They gave me a nice little pay rise, and I thought, brilliant. You know, that's me set for the next 10, 15 years. Unfortunately, their business plan wasn't that great, and the channel ended up going bankrupt within 12 months, as I'm sure a lot of people remember. So in 2002, I was sort of looking around for work. I freelanced actually for about 6 months and had quite a nice little portfolio. And a friend of mine who I'd worked with at the BBC World Service, a guy called Rob Minshall, who now works for the ABC in Brisbane, he worked at SBS at the time, SBS Radio. And he got in touch with me and said, look, they're looking for a commentator over here because, and I'm sure people remember this guy's name, Paul Williams, was a fantastic commentator back in the day. Unfortunately, Paul wasn't very well, and later on he passed away tragically. So Paul was unable to work. So they were looking for this football commentator. And I said to Rob, I said, mate, seriously, I live on the other side of the earth. They know nothing about me. Why would they be interested in me? And he said, well, no. You know, send your CV in and a show reel. I'm sure they'd be interested. So he went on about it so much. In the end, more to keep him quiet than anything else, I said, look, okay, I'll send a CV in, I'll send a show reel in, and I thought that would be that. And to my utter astonishment, a few weeks later, I got an email from the then deputy head of sport, Ken Shipp, saying we're very interested, and, you know, would you be interested in coming over to Australia? So I wasn't married, I had no kids, still have no kids. So I thought, well, why not? I'd actually had a chance for 18 months prior to that to move to Singapore and turn that down because, excuse me, the offer from ITV had come in. And I'd sort of thought, well, you know, I'd love to live abroad and have a different sort of an experience. So when this second chance arose, I thought, right, I'm going to go for it. And I did, thinking it would probably be 2 or 3 years, and that would be that. And I'm still here.
17 years later.
Well, 3 years after that, so 2003, you came here. In 2006, actually, you were selected as part of the commentary team for the World Cup in Germany, where you commentated on the Japan versus Socceroos game, an historical game, a brilliant game. The atmosphere was unbelievable. I was actually at Kaiserslautern that day, and I remember running into Johnny Diddlitz on the train platform following. There's 40,000 people, and who do you run into? Another person from Geelong. It was incredible. Mate, talk us through the experience of what it was like, firstly, to be involved in the World Cup, and secondly, to commentate on a game, an historic game where the Australian public saw the very first Socceroos goal at a World Cup.
Yeah, look, it was both a big responsibility and a huge honour and a privilege, really. Obviously, I knew the context of what was about to unfold before the Japan game, Australia's first game at a World Cup since 1974, and I was lucky enough to be behind the microphone for SBS, flying solo, as I was in those days as well, no co-commentator. So I was aware that, this was big back home, but I actually made a phone call back home to a friend of mine just before, I think it was about an hour before kickoff, and it was very noisy where they were. And I said, geez, you're in a noisy place, where are you? And my friend said, I'm at a fan fest in Sydney. There's about 15,000 people here. And this was like 2 o'clock in the morning Australian time. So I was thinking, wow, okay, so no pressure here then. But that's how big it was. And obviously I was, fortunate enough to call the first ever goal for Australia at the World Cup finals, thanks to Tim Cahill. He did the difficult bit. I just had to get the name right. But it was a magical experience, and one that I'll never ever forget.
No, Tim Cahill.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, he came off the bench and scored twice, and I remember making the quip about, I hope he's had his Weet-Bix, because if you remember, he had a sponsorship with Weet-Bix at the time.
That's right. Yeah, he did.
He did, and we both did a Weet-Bix after that, which was great.
So again, a little bit later, well, actually around about the same time, Fox Sports offered you a 3-year deal as the main commentator for the A-League. On the Fox, and as well as I think the Fox Sports show, I think it was Total Football, was it called?
Yeah, I mean, in 2006, after the World Cup, a lot of the broadcast rights for football moved over to Fox Sports. So, for me, that was a natural place to be. I mean, I was sorry to leave SBS because they'd done an awful lot for me. They'd helped establish my name in this country, not just with football, but of course, I hosted the Ashes in 2005 as well, the cricket series, which was wonderful for me as well. So they did a lot for my career, but I wanted to be involved in football on a week-by-week basis. Fox had and still have the A-League. They then had taken up the Socceroos as well. So it was a natural sort of home for me, and I was fortunate enough that they wanted me, and I've been there ever since.
Was there a bit of antagonism between SBS and Fox Sports in those early days when Fox left? I know with a lot of the fans, it was kind of like SBS was the true blue soccer station, and now they were being priced out of the game by the newcomers on the block. Was there much of that feeling amongst the commentators or behind the scenes or any of that sort of stuff?
Oh, look, there was always a bit of healthy competition, which I think is only natural. And whilst of course we respected what SBS had done for football, nobody more than me, because I'd worked there for 3 years, but. The harsh reality of life in the A-League was that the clubs, if they were going to be successful, and the league, if it was going to be successful, needed the money that Fox were prepared to pay. And SBS didn't have that money because they were, backed by the government. So I think it was, while it was unfortunate for SBS, because a lot of people felt that, the game should have still been with them, but that's just the commercial reality of professional sports, unfortunately. And Fox were prepared to pay the money. Initially, I don't think it was even that much, really. But obviously, since then, it's grown, an awful lot, and until we get to today's point, where the current A-League deal is worth about 50-odd million a year.
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah, so I suppose we'll touch on Fox in a moment and football, but some of the issues that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, Simon, is obviously post-COVID and what football looks like when we come out of this, and we're starting to come out of it now. But are we well placed in Australia post-COVID in the short, medium term to get things right?
Wow, that's a question that could go about 3 hours in terms of the answer. I think
3 minutes then.
Look, we're in a difficult moment. I don't think it's pulling the wool over anybody's eyes to say that. There is a question mark as to whether Fox is going to continue with the A-League. I don't think that's any secret at all, or whether it's going to be a reduced rights fee. I can't give you the answers because I genuinely do not know. I think football has had and has a big opportunity at this current point in time, with the break in play, not just at the A-League but at NPL level as well, to have a good, long, hard look at itself in the mirror and decide which way it wants to go forward. Because at the moment, I don't think it's working as well as it could do. And certainly at A-League level, we've seen a dip in crowds, certainly seen a dip in ratings, and a dip in interest. And, in my industry, the football media, you can see that in very harsh and practical terms. I'll just give you a little list here. Over the last 3 or 4 years, in terms of the football media, we've lost Les Murray and Mike Cockrell. Of course, they tragically passed away. David Davutovic has left the Herald Sun. Matt Windley has left the Herald Sun. Ray Gatt has left the Australian. Carly Adno has left Fox Sports. Daniel Garb has left Fox Sports. Emma Kemp has moved on from the Daily Telegraph. So we've lost an awful lot of football media, and they haven't been replaced. Now, that tells you the health of the game. And this is not just the A-League. This is the overall health of the game. There is a lot to do to put this game right. There are lots of plus points. The A-League, I think, has worked to a large degree. The Socceroos have been successful. The Matildas in particular have been very successful. And we've seen the establishment of the National Premier Leagues. But I think really we're still a very fractured game. I think we've made some big strategic mistakes. We haven't built on some very big moments that we've had. I'll give you a couple of examples. The Asian Cup win in 2015, the grand final in 16-17 between Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory, which attracted a cumulative audience on Fox and SBS of over 2 million. We have not built on those moments. We've stood still, and by doing so, we've gone backwards in a very competitive landscape. One more thing, we've almost killed off the active supporters, which is a tragedy and makes me furious. In a bid to appease the mainstream, we have turned against what the essence of football is all about. And that's the supporters. We have to get that back. And that's, the task, or at least one of the tasks for James Johnson and his team, but he cannot do it on his own. Everybody needs to work together. The problem is in this game, in this country, as we all know, working together has quite often proved beyond us.
Simon, do you think that we as a sport have tried to get the mainstream sports media in this country on board a little bit too much, maybe often at our own detriment? And ultimately, have we proven to be unsuccessful in that? Should we start to adopt a different policy as far as our own media promotion or packaging? Do we have to start thinking a little bit outside the square? What's your opinion on that?
Well, Tonchi, I'll take you back to a quote from James Johnson when he took over as FFA CEO. He said, "We are going to be a football-first organisation." And I thought, hallelujah, someone gets it. There is nothing wrong with chasing dollars. We all need dollars to survive. There's nothing wrong with chasing, fans who might like football but are not totally in love with it. Absolutely. But we cannot forget the core fan base of this country. We need to be authentically football. And I do think that we have chased or tried to appease the mainstream a little bit too much. One example, a couple of years ago, we had a Star Wars round. Star Wars round. We had Darth Vader on the pitch before an A-League game. And I remember thinking, are you serious?
That wasn't Kevin Muscat in disguise, was it?
We've had talk about having music played at corner kicks. Come off it. That's not football. I think most fans want an authentic competition that they can support. They don't want salary caps or squad limits or gimmicks or huge oversized stadiums, playing in oval stadiums that the crowd gets lost in. We want to go back to basics, and we want to celebrate what's good about our game. If people want to come and be a part of it, brilliant. And I tell you this, when the Western Sydney Wanderers first started playing out of the old Pertex Stadium, I reckon 2,000 or 3,000 people came along every week because they wanted to be part of that atmosphere with the RBB. We killed that. We killed that ourselves, trying to appease the mainstream, who tried to write us all off as being hooligans. There were one or two idiots, don't get me wrong, and they needed to be dealt with. But they painted us all with the same brush.
Yep.
And we bent over backwards to accommodate them. And by doing that, we ignored our own fan base. And the fans have voted with their feet. How can we blame them? Absolutely ridiculous. So we've got to get back to football first. Forget about the rest. If we get the football right, we get the structures right, we get the atmosphere right, the mainstream will come along anyway.
Just on what you said then, and I wrote it down before you started, but you know, the Oval Stadium, the Amy Stadium, which is slightly smaller, you know, Western Sydney have got their new stadium, Olympic Park in Sydney. Are these stadiums too big for what we've got? You look at what Sydney did this year, where they took it out of the big stadium into a smaller stadium where they had 8,000 or 9,000. I think Brisbane did it towards the end of towards the middle of the season, where they took it out, and the atmosphere was, you know, Western United here took it out of the GmbH stadium. I know that's caused them problems, but they took it to EJ Whitten Oval. And the atmosphere was far, far better there because there was a crowd of 4,000 or 5,000. You were closer to the pitch, and it would made more of an atmosphere. Is football being killed by these big stadiums where there's no atmosphere at all?
100% it is. And look, let's start with Western United. I know you got the cap on there, Tonchi, so I trust you're a fan of.
I'm trying to change each week. I'm trying to change my caps, you know, but there we go. I shouldn't have worn it tonight, but it doesn't matter.
Well, look, you know, in my opinion, and I hope I'm not treading on any toes politically here, because I don't know what the Melbourne Knights view is, but Western United should be playing at Knight Stadium in Summer Street. That's the logical venue for them, providing they can come to some sort of an agreement, and the Melbourne Knights to have them. So you've got the Melbourne City one on now. But yeah, the overall point is correct. I go to Suncorp Stadium, the old Sydney Football Stadium, and you can have 10, 15,000 people inside, but the size means that they get lost, and the atmosphere is poor, and therefore it doesn't look that good or sound as good, crucially, on television. We need to get back that unique flavour of what football is about, and that's about the fans creating noise. And I think the players respond to it as well. I think they play better, you know, when there's a crowd that's close to the pitch making a lot of noise. Well, I went to years. What we've had is when I go to these A-League grounds, and I go to obviously all of them all around the country, they've all become a cookie cutter clone of the rest. Everything looks, smells, feels exactly the same. That's not football. Football has different, unique flavors, and we've got to remember that and get back to it, because otherwise we're just a cheap imitation of rugby league and Aussie rules. And why would people watch that when they've got the real thing? We've got our own unique identity. Let's use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was lucky enough last year, and one of our regular guests, Tommy McGovern here, was, you know, Melbourne Knights. So I was lucky enough to go to the Adelaide United Melbourne Knights game last year in the FFA Cup, actually. And they was there too. Sorry?
I was there too. I was calling it.
Yeah. And the atmosphere was fantastic. Okay, there was flair, but the atmosphere, because you're close, it's a proper football stadium. They need to re-look at this, having 20, 30,000 stadiums when there's only 3,000 or 4,000 people. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And the overheads to do that are ridiculous. So you're better off scrapping it all together.
You know what? Why Sydney FC, and they are absolutely hell-bent on going back to the Sydney Football Stadium. Why they would do that, I've got no idea. I know that the transport links are a bit better for the SFS, but the atmosphere at Jubilee Stadium and Leichhardt Oval is so much better than they can create at the Sydney Football Stadium. You've still got that there for your grand finals and your big derbies. You can still use them. But really, they should be playing at smaller stadiums. And more importantly than that even, clubs should be looking to have their own stadiums, at least control their own stadiums, preferably build them. But if that's too expensive, there are plenty of suburban venues that can be transformed into good A-League boutique venues and used by clubs that are the right size for the crowds that we draw for the A-League. And then, in future years, as hopefully the crowds then build, okay, then you can look at going back to the bigger venues. But at the moment, it makes zero sense for me. I've never thought that it made any sense playing at those big venues, to be honest, apart from Big Derby.
You look at our sponsors ground, brand new facility. Don't know whether you've had been fortunate to go there at George Cross at Fraser Rise.
Not yet.
A fantastic facility, and I know they're looking to adapt it even more and put seating on the far side. That's a perfect venue for a club like Western United, who are not getting 15,000 to 20,000 at the moment. Go and use a facility that you're going to get 5. Make it a real. How good would it be if there's 5,000 people really close to the pitch, singing and chanting? How much more beneficial is it going to be to the players?
Of course, and more beneficial for the team as well. I think everybody thought when Western United were announced and they said they were going to go and play for the first. Look, we know eventually that they hope to build a new stadium. I'm not going to make comment on that because I know there's a lot of controversy about whether it'll get built or whether it won't. But in the first couple of seasons, they said, right, we're going to go and play in Geelong at GMHBA Stadium. And I remember thinking, no, that ain't going to work because you're a new club, you're trying to build a fan base, and the worst possible thing you can do is go to a 36,000 venue that's not going to provide any atmosphere, because even the fans that do come along, they're not exactly going to be bowled over by the atmosphere or the experience. And the pitch is too far from the stands. Now, thankfully, I think they're looking to rethink that and maybe go to different venues next year, which is good. But I just think that was a no-brainer, really, and they got it wrong. But look, they're not on their own. I think there's been a lot of mistakes made. Quite why, I don't know. But again, if people have that thing in their head, think about football and the supporters first. That's a start. And not everybody's done that in positions of power over the last few years, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Now, Simon, I guess because of the circumstances we find ourselves in now, change is inevitable, and most of it is forced upon us. And especially when it comes to tighter fiscal policy by the clubs, by the league, etc. What do you see happening in the foreseeable future with regards to the elite level competition here in Australia, i.e. the A-League, the FFA Cup, and also you touched on a second-tier national competition? Will that be put on hold at the moment because of what's going on with the coronavirus? Or is this the opportunity now to really scale things down and make it a little bit more all-inclusive?
The honest answer, Tonji, is I don't know.
I knew he was going to say
I don't know what the FFA are thinking. I don't know what the clubs are thinking. I don't even know what Fox Sports are thinking. And I think
what's your gut feeling say? What do you think will happen? Not necessarily what will happen.
Well, look, the first thing that has to be it's not that I'm avoiding your question here, but I don't think we will know what is going to happen until we find out what is going to happen with the TV deal.
Yeah.
Because that is the crux of everything. If we continue along the same path, there's 3 years left on the deal at $57 million a year, then I would expect that those conversations about Division 2 and promotion relegation, an expanded W League, et cetera, they would continue along the same path. If it's going to be worth half that much, which has been speculated, or perhaps it's not going to be on Fox at all. It might be on a different platform. It may be that the clubs go it alone. I think all options are on the table. A lot will depend upon the finances that the game has at its disposal. And that's why I'm prevaricating on answering the question. I can tell you what I would like to happen.
Yeah.
I know that discussions, taking place all around the country about this. I would love to see a national second division. I would love to see, even perhaps before that, a proper program of expansion for the A-League rather than this ad hoc, let's bring in 2 clubs and we're going to go here and there. And then that's it for another 5 years. Well, that's not a strategic plan. That's just, picking a dot point on a map and saying we're going to go there. You look at what happens in the MLS. They've got clubs queued up like dominoes, waiting to come in, and they know 2-3 years in advance that they're going to be in MLS. So they've got time to prepare. They've got time to build stadiums, build infrastructure. With respect to Western United, and I fear the same is going to happen with MacArthur FC, I don't think they were, 100% ready. And why would they be? Because they only had like less than a 12-month lead in. So we've got to become much more strategic in the way we try and build a game in this country. But unfortunately, the big elephant in the room is the TV deal. And until we know what's happening with that, I don't think there'll be any decisions made on A-League, W-League, Second Division, or anything else, because the simple fact of the matter is we just don't know what money is going to be available.
That's a very good answer. And have you ever thought about going into politics? We're getting a lot of people actually saying, fantastic what you're saying, you should be involved in the administration side of things. Serious question here. Have you been asked by Football Federation Australia or any other body to come on board and be involved in that administrative level?
The short answer is no, but I wouldn't expect to be, because at the moment I'm a journalist, a broadcaster, so you can't really do both. You can't sit on an FFA board or a committee and make decisions and then go and talk about it, because you are horribly conflicted. So it would be one or the other. And of course, a lot of those administrative roles are A, taken, and B, let's say something outlandish. I would sit on the FFA board. Well, that's unpaid. It's a volunteer. I've got to pay the bills. I'm not that rich. Look, I see my job really as being a provoker of discussion and debate, and we do not have enough of it in this country. I just mentioned a few minutes ago the amount of football media that have either passed away or drifted out of the industry. Who is talking about football in the mainstream at the moment? There's very few people. So I see that as being, my job is to hold those people in power to account by asking questions, offering opinions, and challenging those in positions of authority to move this game forward. You have to say, if I've been doing that for the last 15 years, I haven't been very successful at the moment.
Just on that, Simon, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon. But I just want to ask, in terms of football, are we? And I've asked this question a few times now, and I've never really got a straight answer for anybody. Are we trying to be too much like Europe? We're not Europe. We haven't got the same interaction with our supporters, our people here in Australia. Are we more like the MLS? Should we be going towards what the MLS is like, or something different?
I think we measure ourselves too much against Europe, that's for sure. And that's in many ways understandable, because the Premier League obviously is very popular here, as is La Liga, the Bundesliga, etc. It's ridiculous to compare the A-League or our competitions to the ones in Europe. They're different beasts completely. By the same token, we're constantly measured by the mainstream media against rugby league and Aussie rules. Well, who cares what they do? They're completely different sports. So we get caught betwixt and between. What we should be measuring ourselves against is Asia. That's our backyard. And we take no notice of Asia whatsoever. We've been a part of this confederation now for the best part of 15 years. Who could name, apart from me, because I call the K-League game on Friday, who could name a handful of players from each K-League team, or a team in the J-League, apart from Angie's side maybe, or players from the Chinese Super League, or players from the Saudi Pro League? That's our backyard. We have to focus much more on Asia, and there are a myriad of possibilities, and not just economic ones, in the giant continent to the north. We ignore it. We look to Europe, or we look to America. We're not a part of either of those regions. We're a part of Asia. And I don't think we have either exploited or connected anywhere near well enough. And one great example of that is, most countries in the AFC have the 3+1 rule, and we've just ignored it. We just ignore Asian players. And yet we play their national teams in World Cup qualifiers. Why do we pay such little heed to what is on our doorstep? It just utterly bemuses me.
Baffles us. Now, Simon, I'm going to play the role of your agent, actually. Now, we've got Mark Sultana he's actually saying Martin, I think in reference to Martin Tyler, saying the new Martin Tyler, Simon Hill. Martin, come and call a game at George Cross versus Sydenham. He's the president, Mark Sultana. He's saying, ask the question, we will stream it live, Football Out West. There you go. There's your first debut.
I'll call you after the show and have a chat about it.
But the next one on the screen we've got
every 5 minutes here, so that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, shush, Craig. I'm trying to rustle up some business for Simon here. On the screen, we've got a book there. Simon Hill, Just the Gob on a Stick. Now, I've had the pleasure of reading this book, and it goes obviously into depth. Your whole career spanning, a couple of decades now, and it's an absolute fantastic read. And Gob on a Stick. How did you get that name, Gob on a Stick?
Well, this goes back to my days at the BBC, at a station called BBC Radio Lancashire. And one of my co-presenters or colleagues, a guy called Gary Hickson, was a wonderfully gruff Mancunian, a bit like me. Unfortunately, he's a United fan. But we were sat in an editorial meeting one day and we were discussing, I can't quite remember the context, but there was something that we put on our radio show that the listeners either didn't like or there'd been a bit of controversy about it. And we were sort of discussing what to do about it. And Gary said in his resigned way that he loved to do, very world weary, he said, hey, let's be honest, no matter what we say on this radio station, to all the public out there, we'll only ever be just a gob on a stick. And at the time that made me laugh. That was back in 1993, 94, I think. So it stuck with me. And when I got around to writing the book, I thought, yeah, that's not a bad title. Gary loves it, by the way. He's got a copy as well.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. We've almost spoken for an hour, and we could go for another hour, mate. We're going to have to get you back on the show again one day soon, if that's okay. But we wish you all the best, and that Gob on the Stick available at all good booksellers, wherever around the country or on the internet. Go out and get it. I tell you, it is a great read. And Simon, we wish you all the best with Fox Sports calling the K-League action as well. And look forward to hearing and seeing more of you in the near future.
Certainly hope so. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a real blast. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon. Borada, mate.
Borada.
That was Simon Hill, Fox Sports commentator, K-League commentator, an author, and an all-round good bloke. How good was that interview?
Yeah, no, he's great. He's very down to earth. He talks a lot of sense. He's been in the business for a long, long time. He knows football inside out, and it's. I had a feeling tonight was going to be a good conversation with him, and as you just said, we must get him back on at some point because he really is fantastic.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we've been, poor Danny TIATTO, he's been in the green room for about an hour now. He's been waiting to get on. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to have Danny. We're going to whiz through him. He's got some fascinating stuff to talk about. He's a very, very opinionated man. He will say it as it is, so you do not want to miss this. We're going to have a couple of messages from our sponsors, so don't go away. Take a break, go grab yourself a coffee, go to the toilet, do what you need to do, but don't go away. This is Danny TIATTO coming up on the other side of the break.
and Greater Geelong. With over 20 years of experience working and playing within the academy systems of several professional clubs in both the UK and Australia, CMF Soccer Coaching has a player-first philosophy to ensure that all sessions are tailored around the individual's needs at all times. Under the guidance of UEFA and AFC qualified coaches, we specialise in one-on-one and small group coaching sessions, offering European-style academy-level training with the sole aim of improving players' technical and game understanding in a safe, friendly environment. If you are new to the game or a seasoned campaigner looking for some additional coaching, then we can help. To find out more about what we can offer and how we can help you improve your game, visit our Facebook or Instagram pages for more information, or simply email us at cmfsoccercoaching@gmail.com.
Welcome back to the Football Out West show, Craig. It's been a massive show tonight, an absolutely huge show, and we're about to introduce our next guest tonight.
We have, and I guess, as I said earlier on, this guy needs no introduction. We'll just get him straight in. He's been there. He's been sat in the green room long enough. Danny TIATTO, welcome to the show.
Hello, Danny.
Your microphone's not working.
He may have muted himself. Hopefully, he has it. Hello, Danny. Can we hear you? Hello. We've got some technical issues there with Danny. Seems to be. Hello, Danny. He keeps muting himself for some unknown reason. Well, we've got vision there of Danny TIATTO, but we haven't got audio. Hello, Danny. Now, we might get him to log off and then log back on. It just doesn't seem to be happening there. But Danny TIATTO, ex Socceroo legend. He's been so patient. He's been in the green room for about an hour after Simon Hill. that was a fantastic interview. We're getting a lot of great comments coming from people on the comment section saying a very, very interesting interview that was. Craig, what did you take out of Simon's hour-long rant? No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I think what I got out of it is, and we come back to now and football as it is. And Simon Camilleri said here, it's the same conversation every week, and unfortunately, Simon, it is. And the reason it is because it's in such a bad state that unless we're continually talking about it, nothing will change. We can't change it. Simon Hill can't change it. Danny TIATTO can't. But the more pressure we put on the people above us, the more chance we've got of getting things changed. So, it is down to everybody. He, along with everybody else that we've had on the show over the last 6 or 7 weeks, are saying exactly the same thing. So, let's pull together. Let's make sure that we're going in the right direction and take the game forward.
Well, we've got him on this. We've got him now live. Hopefully, the audio has fixed up. Danny TIATTO, welcome to the show. Are you there, mate?
Yes, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can. We can. Now, Tommy Gavran has got a really good comment. Mad dog, mad dog, mad dog. Never seen a tougher, more intense player as Danny when he burst onto the scene at Knights. I do believe Gavran was in the youth team at the time. He's already swearing, hence the mute. I don't know if that's the case, Tom, but nonetheless, it is an absolute pleasure, Danny, to have you back on the Football Out West show. Mate, you're our probably, apart from Mark Sultana, the George Cross president, who's been on our show several times, you're probably the first one to be on our show for the second time. So welcome.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Now, as we mentioned, you were our first guest on our inaugural show way back in episode 1. 23 shows later, we've got you back on as a second-time guest. A great deal has happened, obviously, since then. What are you doing these days? Are you still up on the sunny Gold Coast?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, still living up here on the Gold Coast, mate. Enjoying the lifestyle at this period of time. But before the COVID-19 hit, was involved at a local junior club up here called Logan Lightning, coaching my young boys under 14 side.
Now, Logan Lightning, that's where last year's North Geelong coach James Coots is at the moment. Is that right, Craig?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, he is. I think he's doing the seniors, Dan, isn't he?
Yes, that's right. He is. Yeah.
How's Cootsy doing? Do you see much?
Yeah. We train on the same nights as well. They train after us, and he's doing well there. Unfortunate what's come about, but he's a very inspiring young coach, and seems to be doing a good job there with the first team.
Absolutely. Now,
and you mentioned there, you're obviously involved in junior coaching at the moment. In your opinion, Danny, is the quality and standard of the junior coaching in Australia better or worse than it was in the days growing up when you were a kid in the western suburbs of Melbourne?
Oh, good question.
Well, it's definitely worse. I think at this period of time, we've tried to implement all these curriculums and all these licenses for all these so-called coaches coming through, but the knowledge, they don't have the knowledge of the game. We just don't have enough. Again, I maybe because my son's playing, but we just don't have enough ex-players, players who played at a decent level to come in and coach these junior kids from the ages of 8, 9, 10, 11. We seem to be concentrating our so-called better coaches at the ages of 14, 15, 16. That's not the right time to catch them. We're actually going around the wrong way. We need to be coaching these kids younger and actually working them harder, making it more difficult for them to get into sides, because at the moment everyone's playing and there's no promotion and relegation in junior football as well, which is a waste of time as well. When I was growing up, if you weren't good enough, the bottom teams would always get relegated, the ones below would come up, and there was always that competitive edge going through the junior football. Now they don't have it anymore. So I can see that being a problem why we were not producing better kids. And also the standard of the kids. All these parents don't want their kids to be left out of sides. They're the ones that complain and whinge when their kids aren't good enough to be put into the top side. So it really agitates me when I see the junior football the way it's going at the moment.
Yeah, all the statistics, all the numbers, all the everyone talks about how popular it is, and it's the participation figures are going through the roof, and they are through all around the country. More kids, more people play, I guess, football than any other sport. But have we now maybe pandered to the sport being more of a recreational outlet where, it's just let's try and appease the participation figures as opposed to really pushing the quality and pushing the development of that quality at the elite level?
I think for junior football, you've got to see what the level of the kids are at. If they want to play community football and play for a club that they just want to go out there and enjoy it and not really have that competitive edge, well, there's plenty of clubs around that. But if the kids are good enough and the parents are keen enough, you're going to have to provide clubs that are actually going to be, the right coaches, the right environment, the better kids. And that's the only way. We need a pyramid system at a junior age as well, where, you know what, maybe those same kids won't be playing under 14s or following season because they're not good enough. They might have to go to another club. You've got to keep on building that pyramid to make sure that each club, you can produce the best kids by the time they get to 17, 18. And then if they're good enough, well, that's a stepping stone then for them to actually play for their local club or get to a Brisbane Roar, get to a Melbourne Victory, get to a Melbourne City. And that's how we can produce players. But at the moment, they're all just looking at their own clubs and their own interests at every club individually.
Well, you've just mentioned there your own interests, and there's a comment here from Simon Camilleri again, who's always active on our show, and he's put quality coaches don't get a decent wage for mini roos and juniors level. That's a big problem for me. What you've just said there about looking after people's own interests. The interests are not with the coaches.
Okay? Yeah, well, you're 100% right. There's no doubt about that. Again, there's again, like myself, it's just that I'm fortunate enough that my son's there. I don't get paid to coach at their club. But again, I know there's probably, ex-players that probably would welcome a little bit of money to coach these kids as well. And I understand that, totally that, what if they're going to spend, four nights a week training these kids and then game time, they need a little bit of money to, for them to move forward. But I think, again, I think there's enough passionate people and ex-players out there who'd go out of their way to develop, kids and junior kids to progress them forward.
Danny, today, is it easier or harder for junior footballers in Australia to make it as a professional?
100%. Definitely here in Australia.
Easier or harder?
It's definitely harder. It's definitely harder for young kids to make it overseas now. There's no doubt about it. Again, because of our lifestyle here in Australia, is very, very easy going, you know, and it's not as hard as what South America, Africa and Europe, you know, just the attitudes of kids and parents here in Australia. It's so blasé and relaxed. And there's, again, that culture of, you know what, winning, wanting to be the best kid, best player, trying that dream to make it overseas. I don't see a lot of kids with that, you know, grit between their teeth at a young age anymore.
Yeah, I said it a few weeks ago. We're not hardened, Dan. We're not hardened. You know, I said it, you know, probably 2 weeks ago, I think now. And, you know, my generation now are unfortunately the culprits, because we give everything to our kids now. They haven't got to work hard for it anymore. You know, mum will run around wiping their ass after they've done something bad, but it's not their fault. You know, whereas previously, you know, my generation before me, you know, had to work hard for things. You had to work hard for your upbringing to make you, you know, the best player that you could, to go and play at the level that you did. But I think a lot of players don't expect now without having to put the hard work in, and that's criminal. You know, you're never gonna make it as a footballer without putting in the hard work, the dedication, and that hardened desire to be the very best person you can be, whether that's playing football or anything in life. And I think, you know, we're just too soft with kids now.
Yeah, we are, but I think it's our junior system, the way it's set up at the moment. When I was growing up, we had regionals. So if you played in the Western region, the Northern region, the Southern region, they would actually pick all these players from these teams, put them together. They would have a tournament at the end of the season. So I'd get the best from the North, best from the West, and they'd have a tournament of these kids. And then from then, they would pick the best kids to represent Victoria at state level. Then you'd go, you know, play New South Wales, you know, Queensland at the end of the year as well. So you had that competitive games most of the year. And then, you know how many times I got kicked in the teeth. I missed out on Victoria from the ages of 13 all the way up till, you know, 16, 17s. Never made it. But again, we don't have that, and players don't get knocked back and don't get rejected.
Yeah.
So all they're doing is getting a smooth ride all the way through until they're 18 without getting a setback. I got that many setbacks that I made myself so determined and train harder every time I got rejected that, you know what, I knew that I was going to be better. I was for it, you know. But at the moment, we're not. All the kids are getting this cruisy ride into their 18, and then as soon as they get one little setback at NPL level or A-League level, they crumble and they're done. They're finished. So that's where we're at the moment.
Now, Danny, we've got a fair bit of comments here on the comment machine, and a lot of them are bringing up your dad. They're saying, ask Danny if his father's unique coaching methods help mould a talented and aggressive Danny TIATTO. We all want to know. That's Maxi Centich. And Tomislav Kral says, if coaches were half as hard as Danny TIATTO's old man Ricky, Australia would win a World Cup in 8 years. Legend. Now, back in the days, we had the old style, old school coaches. And these days, that type of style, that type of controlled aggression, whatever you want to call it, is frowned upon. It's like, no, in some cases, they're actually telling coaches they shouldn't coach from the sidelines. Is that another factor in the equation, that we're being a little bit too politically correct, that we're being a little bit too nice to everyone, that we're being, holding hands and playing ring-a-ring-a-rosy?
Yeah, well, that's why we're at this situation with our junior football and also with our A-League and producing players as well. Yeah. It's because we have gone full circle the opposite way, where, you know what, you can't show that emotion, in training to the kids. You can't show that emotion in games. And I'm not saying, vocally, I'm pretty vocal to the kids out on the park. And for example, I'm just watching other teams and other coaches, during training sessions, during games, and I'm going, these guys are just letting their boys run out there that don't really have a clue about the game just yet, and letting them constantly make mistake after mistake, and then they want to come in at half-time or after the game and then tell these kids, oh, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, you've done that wrong. It's way too late. You've got to coach them on the run. And that's the way I was brought up. My dad coached me and all the teams that I was involved with. He coached us on the run. And then after a couple of years, I knew not to do that mistake because he was coaching us on the run. And it's like a kid at school. A kid at school, at 8, 9, 10 years old, a teacher's going to sit there, watch the kid make mistake after mistake. No, they don't. They correct them on the run at school. So if we're not doing that at training and in games, and actually giving them the right information in training in games, not to yell at them and scream at them, but give them productive and constructive criticism. Well, how are we gonna create these kids to become top footballers down the track? And I totally understand. Yeah, you can do it to a certain age, but by 15, 16, I will not have to speak to my son, another kid that I've been coaching for 4 or 5 years, because he's going to know exactly, because I've been coaching him on the run, what to do. So I stopped talking then at 15, 16 to these kids.
That absolutely resonates with me as a coach of an under 9 and team moving up to under 11. Craig, you're coaching under 16 at NPL level and coached all sorts of kids from mini roos all the way to seniors. Does that resonate with you, that observation?
Yeah, it does. And you touched on it with school. Your kids go to school, they learn their math, they learn their geography. If they don't get it, teachers stop them, help them, and make sure they understand it. In football, we don't. We just let players do the wrong thing time after time after time again. You all know that I run my own coaching clinic, and I have boys come to me that have been playing football for 10 years, and some of the habits that they have, it's incredible. Why can't you control the ball off your back foot to play the first touch forward? What have you been doing for the last 10 years in your coaching sessions during your games? So yeah, it definitely does resonate with me, and it probably resonate with a lot of coaches. We just need to look at what the coaching philosophy looks like, and if you get a chance to sit down with Coop, Dan, sit down with him, because he is a very, very good coach, very young coach, very up and coming coach, and he really does know what he's talking about. I'm not saying that you don't, but he's another for me, another level of coaching for Logan as well. Just want to touch back on your early days, and there's a few comments up here which Tonch can put up in a moment. But you played in the old NSL with Melbourne Knights, and then you embarked on a fantastic professional career in Europe. Excuse me if I get it wrong. So you were Manchester City, Wolves, Leicester. Have I missed anybody else off there?
Well, originally I first went over to Italy in the Serie B, a club called Salernitana in the south of Naples, and I was there for a year and a half, and then actually got a loan move to Stoke City, and I was there for about 8 months, and then I made my move to Man City, where I stayed there for 6 seasons, and then progressed on to Leicester City for 3 years, and then moved back and played for Brisbane Roar for 3 seasons as well.
Yeah, fantastic. But I mustn't stop that. I really have to note that you also played for a bigger club than any of those, and you actually played for a season in State League 5 for the Point Cook Jets.
Yes, I did. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and they were a great pub team, and I thoroughly enjoyed that season.
Lindsay Phillips won't like you saying it was a pub team.
Joe Spiteri, Danny TIATTO, pub,
Speaking of Joe Spiteri, another player that fronted up for the Melbourne Knights back in the 90s, Tommy Gavran. Again, Tommy Gavran, he's really got a lot to say tonight. Ask Danny whether the Knights of the 90s is still the best club team to take the field in this country. Oh, now that's a good question. Let's compare. I know it's difficult. Sometimes it looks like comparing apples and oranges, but let's compare that era of the mid-90s, the NSL era, and the A-League, because you did play with the Brisbane Roar, 2009, 2010, thereabouts. Can you compare the two eras?
Well, if you're looking at the A-League now, when we say Sydney FC is the pinnacle at the moment, or the best club in the country,
yeah.
And then if you put our old Melbourne Knights team together, and the players that we had at the time, and again, you could go through that whole squad, and there wasn't a weak link in that group of 15, 16 players that we had at the time. So, to be honest, I don't think Sydney would have a chance against the likes of our old Melbourne Knights side that we had back then. With the likes of Frank Jurich in goals, Falsa Diomicic at the back, Joe Simnich at the back, David Savinsky that passed away the other year as well. Biskic, Viduka, Joe Spiteri, myself, Seelig. But again, Cresmo, there's that many players, and that the squad that we had and the talent that we had, and the amount of those boys that went over to forge themselves a career overseas.
Yeah.
Again, it's very hard. Everyone goes, again, you'd be crazy if you would think that side would lose to a Sydney FC today in the modern game. So to be honest, they wouldn't come near us. Again, they've got a good little side there and some decent foreigners, but really no chance.
Now, here we go. Marissa in Sarah also says, you forgot one other club, the Werribee City Bees, where Ricky really sent him on the path to glory. So definitely cannot forget Werribee City, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was my first stomping ground, Werribee. So yeah, that was a good old Italian club back there, and from where I was born. And yeah, that was a great little club to be involved in as well growing up.
Another one of our many great clubs out in the western suburbs. Craig, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so I just want to speak about, I suppose, your interview, your recent interview you had with Dr. Sports, where you said the A-League has died on its arse. It quotes you as saying that it's due to the lack of culture and expertise. What do you exactly mean by that? What's your...
The reason I said that, because again, previously, 5 years ago, or when Australia won the Asian Cup, again, that was a great stepping stone for the game and the A-League to really kick on and really make inroads. And the way it's gone from then till now, it's just incredible. Again, I know I was quoted saying, the foreigners that are coming over aren't quality. No, there's some quality foreigners. You've got Castro, Lafondra, Ninkovic, Diamante. There's some good foreigners, but again, we are getting foreigners that are taking young boys' positions, Australian boys, that aren't good enough and should be better than what we've got here in Australia. Yeah, some of those ones at the clubs, are better, but some of the other ones they're bringing over are just taking spots from our Australian young boys who have got a bit of potential to actually play in the A-League, and that's what I was getting at. Not that every A-League player, every foreigner is poor. I'm just saying we need to actually readdress that. And again, if we're bringing foreigners here to our country, they need to be top-notch foreigners and quality. So again, that's my outlook on it. And again, the promotion and relegation and the intensity of the games. Again, all these players, not just foreigners, but also the Australian-based players, they are in the comfort zone. They know that they're going to get a contract. Again, there's players in the comp that have got 4 or 5 A-League clubs, or
6.
if not more, 6, 7. And again, they're recycling the same players year after year. That's what disappoints me as well. There's no hunger, no passion in these players anymore. They're just collecting a bit of money just to tick over every year, which is disappointing. I was desperate as a young player, like a lot of other boys were, to get in the A-League, but not to stay in the A-League. I wanted to go overseas, whether it was Europe, Asia, wherever it was in the world, to try and be the best I can. At the moment, boys are just happy to sit in the A-League and pick up their money.
But having said that, Dan, and controversially or not, are the kids and Zelko Khaled said the other week when we had him on, that the problem is that the kids that are coming through the system at the moment are not ready for senior football. My argument the other way is, how do you get them experience if we're not giving them that experience? We look at Melbourne City, this season in particular, where they've had, a few young boys, Connor Metcalf, playing, but not playing on a regular basis, week in, week out. How are they going to get that experience to nurture themselves if their spot is being taken over by a 36-year-old who's been at 5 different clubs in the last 6 years?
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at as well. We're not given enough of those young boys who have got a bit of potential. Again, we might say, we're not producing a lot of young kids that can play in the A, but there is kids out there that are probably a little bit hungry and should be given a chance, but they're not getting that chance because we're bringing a second-rate foreigner in the country to take their spot, and that's what I can see as well. So again, but again, going back, why we're not producing as many good young kids, it all comes down from that grassroots, the way we're coaching them, the way that we're putting them through the system without any pressure or any of that promotion relegation in junior football, and that's where we need to look at that as well to make sure that we can produce these better players coming through.
Post-COVID-19, with obviously everyone having to tighten their belts, money not being probably in as abundance, and likelihood, we're hearing overseas travel as well might not be happening for quite a while. Does that mean that may actually be a blessing in disguise for the A-League? What do you think needs to happen, and what do you think will happen with the A-League maybe in the next 12 months?
Well, we definitely have to reassess it, and what we need to do is make sure that every state, every federation can get on board and make sure that we give this game that we so dearly love here in Australia to progress and move in the right direction that we know it should be. And at the moment, it's so fractured, and there's too many people with their own interests, whether they own the club, run the club, coaches, etc., etc. We should be producing. It doesn't. If I'm at Logan Lightning and I see some great young kids, again, I like Logan Lightning, but you know what? Well, I've got Brisbane Roar up the road. If I know that I've got a couple of young kids that are good enough to go to Brisbane Roar, I'm sending those young kids to Brisbane Roar. You've got to send the best kids to these academies in the A-League. There's no doubt about it, because it's not going to change at the moment. It's not going to change. So all these clubs should be pushing their best kids to make sure they get into these academies, that they can get a better chance to get into the A-League instead of looking at their own club.
Yes, I absolutely agree. A lot of people will come on and comment. I'm sure we'll get a few in a moment. Should there be some kind of transfer policy for those young kids that have, maybe been at a club since they were 6 years old, 8 years old, been developed by a good coach through that period that's made them into the player that they are? So your Brisbane Roar then come along and say, at 14, I want him. Here's X for your work that you've done over that period of time. Is that what needs to happen?
Yeah, 100%. It has to work like that. Again, if a club produces a young guy and he's 17, 18, you can't have an A-League club then pinching that young kid, and that club gets nothing for developing this kid. So there has to be a minimal fee, whatever it is. There needs to be that in football. It happens overseas in the UK, all over Europe. There's always a fee for these clubs that build these players up and then make their money. And that's how it should be done, and that's how we can generate better kids moving forward.
Biff has made a great point here, Tonch, and he's put coaches want to protect their win-loss ratio rather than play young kids. The reality is, and I've been very strong on my views on this over the last 7 years, or certainly in the last 5 years while I've been coaching, the only team that matters in any football club is the seniors. That's the reality, whether it's senior men, senior ladies. That's all that matters. Everything underneath that, whether it's the reserves, the under-18s, the 16s, right down to under-8s, that's development. That's all their interest should be about. Well, it doesn't matter whether you come last. I've got a group of under-16s that are not going to be in the first division this year hopefully when we go back. We're likely to be in the bottom league. But you know what? They're in the bottom league because that's where their talent is. What I'd like to see from them over the next 3 months as we're going through the season is they're developing. And my goal is to try and get 1 or 2 players into the under-18s before the end of the season. If I do that, then I've done my job as a coach. If I can help these kids develop, if I sat all my kids down today and said, how many of you want to play under-18s or 20s this year? Guarantee you everyone would put their hand up. Now, to do that, they have to work really hard. They have to develop themselves. They have to want to push themselves. And they have to be, ultimately, as it comes back to, they have to be good enough. Yeah. So for me, development coaching is all about development. Forget results. And I know it is important, and there should be winners, there should be losers. But don't make that the end goal for everything in junior football, because it's not as important as the development of football kids. Hence the reason why we're in the situation we are, and everybody's talking about it for the last 7 or 8 weeks.
Is that a problem of, Danny, of just being short-sighted collectively as a sport, or is that too many egos at play? Because we all want to win, of course, that's natural. But like Craig said, you got to put in a little bit of a mid to long-term vision of what you want to achieve, and that may be at the expense of immediate results. Is ego a big problem, within our sport?
100. Oh, again, that's another one. It's 100% it is, because you know why? Because a lot of these guys who are coaching never played at a level, so they just want to show everyone, oh yes, my team just won, this game, that game, so he can feel good about himself. It's not about feeling good about yourself. It's about developing these young kids to get them to a level to you know what? I'd be happier lose not lose, because I hate losing, because I'm very. Yeah, but you know what? In a sense, I would want to see one of my boys, only one of my boys, to go overseas and be a top footballer. It doesn't matter that I've lost a fair few games, but I'm trying to develop players. If you're a junior coach, you're developing players. Again, I don't want to be playing just 6 foot tall, 13-year-old or 14-year-old boys just so I can beat an opposition side who have got little scrawny little kids that just bully them off the ground. What are you doing? That's embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed to do that. But you know how many clubs and how many junior coaches pick just big kids just to bully other teams off the field. Those kids, by the time they get to 17, 18, all those other kids who have been technically, shown how to play the game, they will overrun those big dopey kids who just bully kids off the park. So again, this is what we're doing here in Australia, and I see it week in, week out because I'm involved in junior football, and that's why I'm pretty passionate about where the junior football is going, because I'm involved in it and I can see the rubbish that's happening across the board at junior football.
I love that openness. I love that frankness, and you've just summed it up so well. Closer to home, Danny, I guess, have you, here in the West, have you been following Western United or what they're doing off the field? In your opinion, are they doing enough to engage with the local region and build their supporter base the way they should do, or could they be doing more?
It's a little bit hard for me to really comment too much on Western United, what they're doing, because I'm not over there and I'm not really, involved at the club. Or I know Steve Horvat's involved in all that, and I don't understand. He's got he's a footballer done very well, and he played with me at Melbourne Knights as well. So again, I think they've probably got the right people involved. Definitely got the right people involved. Again, it's just it's always going to be tricky that first season, and then this happens. Again, it's hard to drive a club and build the culture over a short period of time. This, again, clubs and culture, and that's why we're saying back to the Melbourne Knights, South Melbourne House. These clubs are around for 50, 60 years. They've got a connection to the community. When you bring a new team in, you're not going to get it in a year, 3 years, 4 years. These clubs have to stick around for 20, 30 years before you get to the passion of the supporters, the atmosphere, the right venue, the right players, the right people involved at the club. That's the only way we're going to create better A-League clubs and a better product to put out on TV for the general public that don't know about the game to really get behind this game again.
So do we need the likes of South Melbourne, your Melbourne Knights, what they call in Sydney?
Marconi, Apia.
Marconi. Do we need them back in the second division now? Do we need that?
Again, if we could have a promotion and relegation system and these clubs could financially, work their way back and get back into the competition, 100% we should. There's no doubt about it. If their owners and their people who are running the club are passionate and want to drive these clubs forward and they've got the money to finance it and drive it forward, we need to get these clubs back involved. Because at the moment, what we've seen from the A-League, again, that's why I've said it's died on its arse, and there's no atmosphere, there's no passion, there's no passion between the players, not enough passion from the supporters. Again, you don't get that rivalry anymore, and that's what hurts the game here in Australia as well.
Danny, we've got one last question, a really good one too, actually. Once again, Tommy Gavran, my goodness me, he's going to get RSI how much comments he's typing, but this is a really good question, I must admit. Ask what's Danny's opinion on young players playing above their age group? Should players be accelerated if good enough? And if so, at what age do you think it should start happening? I'd go further to say at what age should it stop happening? But that's a great question, Danny.
I think, again, being an ex-player and seeing some of the developments of some of these kids, of course, if the kid is a big boy, strong, has got a little bit of technique, has to have that technique about him as well, why would you just sacrifice him and hold him back in a competition where he's not going to get tested that season, where he's, again, dominating, things become easier? He needs to be pushed up a year, and again, he needs to be tested week in and week out. That's the only way we're going to develop these kids. And then the lesser kids, the kids who are a little bit more physically smaller, they need to be put in a position where it's competitive, but not to knock their confidence and actually demolish the kids' confidence again. So you've got to get that balance, and we need to do that. We need to find that balance. And again, there's a lot of people that, again, as being an ex-footballer, I can say, yeah, that kid there, he's suited to go into that age a little bit higher. That player there, no, he better stay in his age group. That's important because, again, if you're not getting competitive games and getting a good working over as a junior through your whole junior career, you'll never get to a level. So you need to be put in your right age group that's going to, make sure that you're competitive week in, week out. And you know what? We still don't have enough games in junior football as well. That's another thing that we're lacking. Again, there's just not enough competitive games.
I was actually going to touch on that with you before we sort of finish. But, just touching on your point, I'm quite lucky enough, as Tonchi said, to be coaching under 16s. 8 of my under 16s are actually eligible to play under 15s. And every week we bring 2 boys up from the under-15s to be part of the 16 squad, so they get an understanding of what it's like, because physically, technically, the game's quicker. There's no downside, provided they tick the boxes, for any player not to be playing up a year if there's an option to be able to do that. So I'm with you 100% on that, and I think, you know, the more we can get players doing it and playing up at that level on a regular basis. And I think one of the questions you asked there was, when does it start? For me, as early as possible. You know, don't wait until they're 14, 15, 16. Let's get them in. Let's get them, you know, in that environment as soon as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Danny, we could go on forever and ever. I'm repeating myself. I said this with our previous guest, Simon Hill, but we have almost gone 2 hours tonight, Craig. And Danny, firstly, thank you for being so patient and waiting an hour for that gob on a stick to get over it. He was really interesting. You were in the green room for an hour, and we thank you very much. And look, just listening to you and your words of wisdom, particularly about junior coaching, I think has resonated certainly with me, and I'm sure with a lot of our listeners and viewers. So appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. And I'd like to say to Simon Hill as well, mate, he's definitely a great guy, and also a guy that we need to get in the right position. They're the sort of people that we need to get involved at the Federation, who are talking the right sense, knows the game as well. And we need a lot more of those people to get back involved. So hopefully, with all the situations that we're going through now, James Johnson can look and listen to all the ex-players, all the people they've got on the board. And again, I'd like to say, even Craig Johnson, I saw a documentary that he put out on Bein Sport the other week. Again, young kids need to look at these documentaries from ex-players, how hard it was for them to make it to the top level. If we don't show our younger kids here in Australia this is what it takes, we're never going to generate that golden generation ever again here in Australia. We're just going to fall further and further behind Asia, further behind Europe and the rest of the world. So very important that the parents and the kids and coaches do their research to bring this game forward here in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, Danny, once again, thank you very much. And we look forward to episode number 3 when you join us.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Good mate.
Good night.
Cheers, pal.
That was former Socceroo legend Danny TIATTO. Craig, it's been a mammoth episode, a massive episode, our biggest one till today. A sincere thank you to Simon Hill, sincere thank you to Danny TIATTO, and to Owen Filer as well. That was absolutely inspirational at the start of the show, but also to all of the people that have been with us, and none other than Tom Gavran, who has been from start to finish. And no, with all jokes aside, everyone that has been a part of tonight's show. Craig, it's been a phenomenal show. Have we got any news or any hints who our guests for next week may be?
Yeah, look, before we go on to that, there's a comment come up there from a good friend, Eddie Gauci. I know you pop something up on screen. Haven't seen Eddie for quite some time. I hope he's doing well. Hope he's doing well. I know he's been ill, but hope everything's good, Ed, and look forward to seeing you soon up at George's, mate. But just on next week, look, we're going to have a different tact on next week. We're going to move away from, I suppose it is away from it. We're going to move from players next week, and we're going to talk about coaching. Mm-hmm. We've just touched on it there with Danny about what's wrong and what needs to change, and coaching needs to come from a younger age. So a few weeks ago, we had a chap by the name of Ivan Jolic on the show, who's the Matilda's assistant coach and also a coach educator. And soon to be current assistant manager at MacArthur. Ivan's agreed to join us again next week, and we're going to have a session around coach education and coaching. And we're hopefully going to have 2 other guests on who run an online coaching forum, which is a very good forum, very informative. And they get different coaches from around the world on. So we'll fill you in a little bit more on that. But certainly we've got Ivan Jolic, which will be on for next week as a starter.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to the Football Out West Soccer News Facebook page each day, I should say, because we'll try and bring you up to date with all the latest that is going on. We try and do our best to monitor what is going on in the world of football. And there's always something going on. But next week, a show for all coaches, and not just coaches, parents. Parents, you want to know what is going to affect your kids. Players, you want to know what your coaches are thinking and how they can get better. Presidents, club administrators, you want to know and appreciate all that there is to know about coaching. So next week, ladies and gentlemen, Thursday night at 7 p.m, hopefully we're going to have another action-packed show for you. On that note, thank you for joining us. We thank you very, very much for your patience, for your contributions throughout the night, and we cannot wait for next week's show. So until next week, on behalf of Craig and myself, Tonchi, a good night, and thank you once again for being a part of tonight's show.